Actually, it is a very, very difficult subject for me to speak about. And I'll tell you why, because on the one hand, there is an inclination to speak for 7 or 10 hours on the subject, or really to say generalities that will take 7 or 10 minutes. And to be fair to the subject, you know, and I think it is extremely important, not only Lenin made a change in world history, but the important thing about Lenin, we have to study Lenin. I mean, if you read Lenin, I'll start reading with Lenin as a stylist. Now, I know that people will tell you that the style of Lenin is not the most exciting one in the world. But the truth of the matter, the style of Lenin is the man. The style of Lenin is also the movement. If you read Lenin, there is no rhetoric in Lenin. There is no pathos in Lenin. And I simply wrote down a few of the ending of the speeches of Lenin that you can see. That is all that I wanted to say to you. That's an end of a very important speech. One must strive for that, not in words, but in deeds. Very, very flat, it sounds. Now, when you really look at Lenin's speeches, you'll find on the whole they are really appealing, speaking to the conscience of the workers on the level of conscience of the workers. And I'll give you a process of dialogue. There are two kinds of Lenin's writing, and I really will start with it to be clear about. There are Lenin writing in which he writes to the people that know the traditional Marxist position, the people that read Marx and Engels and so on and so on. This is one kind of writing of Lenin, this very, very important kind of writing of Lenin. But the majority of Lenin is not like that at all. The overall majority of Lenin's writing are writing to workers on the assumption that those workers will not be convinced by a quotation, that you have to talk to them in the terms of their own experience, and you find again and again is a process of dialogue in which he goes and argues, and you have a feeling, you know, that he's autodidact, a self-educated man that talks to self-educating other men. And there is the process of really going forward, couple of steps. Then when he finds that he thinks perhaps he went too far, he returns back in order to argue again. Now it is terribly interesting, the two kinds of structure. In the second kind of structure, you don't see at all. You don't see at all the, so to say, the Marxist help. You don't see the infrastructure outside the building that helps really the whole thing to keep together. He simply goes from the assumption that if the workers will only look at their own experience, they will come to similar conclusion that he is bringing forward. Now this is very, very important, because this style means that Lenin above all was a workers' leader. And above all, because he was the workers' leader, he doesn't try to mystify, but to demystify. Not to simplify in terms of simply vulgarize, but simply showing the core of every problem. For example, the state. For thousands and thousands of years, people looked at the state and they thought that the state is something magnificent, complicated, perhaps horrific, but something very, very complicated, very mystical. Not for you and me to understand what the state is, because the state, only the expert can understand the state. And then he turns around and says, you know what the state is? It's very simple. Armed bodies of men, police, army, etc., and prison. This is what the state is all about. There's nothing mystical about it. It is simple. Anybody can understand it. If I understand it, Lenin says, you certainly can understand it. You see, this is a very nice kind of a style, and it's not an artificial style. It fits on the assumption that the working class has to emancipate itself, and therefore the working class has to understand the problem that faces humanity. And this is the first thing we have to start about Lenin and the style. Now, the question of the style is important, and I'll come to it in a minute why it is really very, very important to the whole politics of Lenin. You'll find, for example, a small story, a story of Clara Zetkin, a friend of Rosa Luxemburg. She was a revolutionary during the First World War. She opposed the war, etc., etc., etc. Then at the end of the war, she went to Moscow. She arranged a meeting with Lenin. She fixed the meeting on the telephone, and then she came to a place. In the little room there was sitting an old man, and she was talking to him for half an hour. After half an hour, Clara Zetkin looks at her watch and says, "Where is Lenin?" So this old man said to her, "I am Lenin." "You are Lenin, man, a local councillor in Germany will not speak on such a level as you are speaking. So he said, I'm very sorry, I'm not a bourgeois councillor, I'm a revolutionary socialist or revolutionary communist. Now you see, this really sums up, in a way, his style. And the style is the man. I'll go further than that. When you really look at Lenin's writing, what is the important thing about this style? I mean, why I started really with the question of the style? I'll tell you why I started with the question of the style, because it is terribly important to understand that if the working class is the carrier, is the center of world change, if the emancipation of the working class is the act of the working class, then when Marx said that the working class is the carrier of philosophy, he didn't mean to say that every worker going to work has volumes of Immanuel Kant or Hegel underneath his arm. He meant to say that the working class needs the truth. As an oppressed class, it needs the truth and nothing but the truth. And therefore it doesn't need any mystification. And therefore, if you can't speak in the terms that the working class will understand then it means quite simply that you need the bloody mystification. And that's why the style is connected with the central assumption of Lenin that the working class is at the center of the arena. And although perhaps many people will say, yes, we accept that the working class is the center of the arena, but it's clear what it means. You see, social democrats, for good old 100 years, every May Day, told the world that the working class is the center of the arena. In the day-to-day life, you fight for sixpences, or for a mark, or for having of the working week for about 2 hours or 3 hours, etc. In the day-to-day struggle, you simply fight for little reforms, and that's all. On May Day, you speechify about world socialism, the working class, the center of the arena, etc., etc., etc. Therefore, they never understood when Lenin said, the proletariat, if it is revolutionary, it is everything. If it is not revolutionary, it is nothing. Absolutely nothing. Perfect nothing. You see, and this idea of Lenin, and really central in all his writing, is the first thing I think important to repeat. And we have to repeat it not only in the face of social democrats. We have to repeat it in the face of Stalinists that really believe the working class one day will have workers' control, workers' democracy, etc. I'm absolutely convinced that Kosygin and Brezhnev say, my great child one day will have democracy, etc. In the meantime, you behave. If you know your place now, for 100 years, one day Christmas morning will come, and inside the big stocking you'll find workers' control, workers' democracy, inequality, and all the rest of it. Therefore, the central item of Lenin's concept, that the worker is the center of the struggle, is very, very important. Again, we have to repeat the same thing in the face of Guevara's people. They come and say, that in reality, perhaps the workers are playing a role, or play the role sometimes, but not for our country. Somehow in our country, we'll have to have a tiny minority liberating humanity and not the involvement of the mass of the working class. And therefore, this is the first thing I have to say about Lenin. And then his style has to do with this central assumption. And the first thing that is exciting really about Lenin is how strong and he insists on it all the time. Now, when you really read the biography of Lenin, the thing that impresses me very, very much is a simple thing that his brother was hanged as an narodnik. Now, anybody whose brother was hanged as an narodnik in 1887, he was hanged as an narodnik. Lenin was only 17. Now, number of conclusions you can come from it. Either the little brother, Volodya, Ulyanov, Lenin, either he will follow his brother, or on the contrary, he'll come and say, I'm frightened. The interesting thing about Lenin is this, that although he continued the revolutionary tradition, in one thing he always insisted, in fighting the narodniks. I mean, if you read Lenin's writing, you'll find that there are more than 10 volumes of Lenin attacking the central assumption of the narodniks. And what was the central assumption of the narodniks? That the truth of the matter, the mass of the population cannot act for themselves. Therefore, a minority can act. If you read yesterday, perhaps you've seen the television program on the BBC, a terrible television program. But there was one quotation from Alexander Ulyanov that is authentic quotation. Alexander Ulyanov, the brother of Lenin before he was hanged, said, we are a minority that represents freedom in opposition to the views of the majority. And we, the minority, will have to liberate humanity in the face of the action of the majority. Now, this is the thing that Lenin never accepted for 1 minute.